The castle had stood empty for 300 years, though no one in the village spoke of why. Ilara knew the stories. Everyone did. But stories didn't pay for her mother's medicine or keep the creditors from their door. So when a messenger arrived with a duchy's seal, offering a sum that would solve everything for 1 month's work, she'd sign before reading the full contract. A caretaker, they called it. Someone to maintain the old fortress, while the Historical Society determined its fate. Simple enough. The first thing she noticed was a cold. Not winter cold, though frost still clung to the valley in late March, but something deeper, ancient, the kind of cold that lived in stone and shadow, that had nothing to do with seasons. Her breath clouded in the great hall, despite the spring sunlight. Streaming through windows, she spent the morning cleaning. The second thing she noticed was the silence. Not peaceful quiet, but the absence of all the small sound that made a place feel alive. No birds nested in the eaves. No mice skittered in the walls. Even her footsteps seemed muted, as if the castle itself absorbed sound. She found the locked door on her third day. It wasn't on any of the floor plans they'd given her, tucked behind a tapestry at the end of the east wing's corridor. Iron-banded oak, with a lock that looked like it predated the Renaissance. The key hung on the ring they provided, labeled only with a number that corresponded to nothing in her paperwork. Ilara stood before it for a long moment, key in hand, feeling something she'd learned to trust over her 26 years. The prickling awareness that always came before important moments, the sense that a choice was being offered. She could walk away, finish her contract in the inhabited portions of the castle, collect her payment, save her mother. The smart choice, the safe choice. But Ilara had been poor her entire life, had learned that safety was a luxury she couldn't afford. And she'd also learned that the universe sometimes put opportunities in front of desperate people, chances that looked like mistakes but weren't. The key turned smoothly, as if the lock had been oiled yesterday instead of centuries ago. The door opened without a sound. Stone steps descended into darkness, and Ilara fetched the electric lantern from her supplies before starting down. The cold intensified with each step, until her breath came in visible gasps and her fingers ached even through her gloves. At the bottom, another door stood open, revealing a chamber that stole the air from her lungs. It was a tomb, but not for the dead, or not for the completely dead. The coffin at the room's center was clear crystal, like something from a fairy tale, and inside lay a man who looked as if he'd been sleeping for mere hours instead of— She did the math from the dates carved into the stone. 307 years. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight, all sharp elegance and aristocratic bones, dark hair falling across a face too perfect to be entirely human. But it was the stillness that caught her. Not sleep, not death, something suspended between. Ilara approached slowly, lantern raised, and that's when she saw it. The faint, impossibly slow rise and fall of his chest. Once every minute, perhaps, a breath that took an eternity, around the crystal coffin. Symbols were carved into the stone floor and on the wall, faded but still legible, an inscription in Latin. Her university education, interrupted by her father's death and her mother's illness, hadn't been entirely wasted. She could translate enough. Here lies Lucien Valmont, Lord of Blackmere, by his own hand bound, neither living nor dead, suspended in eternal sleep, until true love's first kiss shall wake him. Let none disturb this rest, for he was both monster and man, and his mercy to this world was to remove himself from it. A vampire. The stories were true. Then Ilara should have been terrified, should have run back up those stairs and never returned. Instead, she found herself kneeling beside the crystal, studying his face. There was something in his expression, even in this deathless sleep, that spoke of loneliness so profound it had its own weight. She'd felt it herself, in the long nights caring for her mother, watching the world move on while she stood still. Before I continue with this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video if you want more stories like this. Write in the comments which city you're watching from, and then we'll continue with the story. Recognize it the way you recognize your own reflection. "What happened to you?" she whispered. The silence gave no answer, but she felt it listening. The castle, the shadows, the cold itself, all of it paying attention to her words in a way that should have been impossible. She reached out, stopping just short of touching the crystal. Did you really ask for this? Or did someone decide for you that the world was better off without monsters in it? She went back upstairs as the sun set, but the vampire haunted her thoughts through a dinner she barely tasted. True love's first kiss. The stuff of children's stories. The kind of thing that didn't exist in a world where love was transactional and everyone left eventually. Her father had loved her, and he'd still died. Her mother loved her, and Alara was watching her waste away despite everything she did prevent it. Love didn't save anyone. But as she lay in a narrow bed in the servants' quarters, she claimed. Staring at the ceiling, Alara couldn't stop thinking about that inscription. His mercy to this world was to remove himself from it. What kind of person chose 300 years of nothing to spare others from what they were? What kind of loneliness was that? The next morning, she returned to the tomb. And the morning after, each visit, she stayed longer, sitting on the cold stone floor, talking to the sleeping vampire about nothing and everything, about her mother's illness, about the bills that never stopped coming, about the scholarship she'd lost when her father died, about how tired she was of being invisible, of being the girl who cleaned and cared and disappeared into the background of everyone else's story. The thing is, she said on the seventh day, her voice echoing softly, I understand why you did it, why you chose this. Sometimes the world feels like it has no place for people like us. People who feel too much, who are too different, who can't quite fit into the shapes everyone else expects. She paused, studying his face in the lantern light. But I don't think you were a monster. I think you were someone who thought they had to be one. The castle's silence had become familiar, almost companionable. She'd grown used to the cold, to the way her breath clouded, to the sensation of being watched by something that meant no harm. That's why she noticed a change immediately, a sound like wind through distant corridors, except there was no wind. The temperature dropped further, frost forming on the crystal coffin in patterns like reaching hands. Alara stood, lantern raised, as shadows coalesced at the chamber's entrance. 3 figures stepped from the darkness, and she knew immediately they weren't human. Too still, too perfect, moving with a grace that defied physics. Vampires like Lucian, but not suspended, not sleeping. Very much awake, and looking at her with expressions that made her blood ice. Well, the first said, a woman with white blonde hair and eyes like winter. It seems the castle has a guest. How inconvenient. They moved faster than thought, and Alara found herself backed against the crystal coffin, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The blonde vampire smiled, revealing elongated canines, and Alara felt that familiar prickling awareness, but this time it screamed danger. You shouldn't be here, little human, the vampire said, almost gently. This is no place for the living. I'm the caretaker, Alara managed, hating how her voice shook. The duchy hired me. We know. A second vampire, male, circled to her left. We arranged it. Needed someone to maintain appearances while we completed our work. But you were supposed to stay in the upper levels, not go exploring. The third vampire, silent until now, studied the crystal coffin with an expression Alara couldn't read. She's been talking to him. I can smell it on her, the resonance of words spoken into the void. He looked at Alara with something that might have been pity. You've been keeping him company. Leave her alone. The blonde vampire's voice was sharp. She's seen too much, that's all. We'll have to adjust our timeline. To Alara, what did you read on the walls, girl? Alara's mind raced. The truth felt like a weapon she couldn't quite grasp. Nothing. I don't read Latin. Lies taste bitter. The blonde vampire was suddenly inches away, cold fingers gripping Alara's chin, forcing their eyes to meet. You read it. You know what he is, what this place is. The question is whether you understood. And Alara, who'd spent years being underestimated, who'd learned to see the truth in people's eyes even when their words were pretty, looked into the vampire's gaze and saw it clearly. Fear. They were afraid of something, and it had to do with Lucian Valmont. The inscription says true love's kiss will wake him, Alara said, letting her voice stay small, scared. Sometimes the best way to learn was to seem like you knew nothing. But that's impossible. True love isn't real. The third vampire laughed, A sound like breaking glass. Oh, it's real enough, little human. Rare as stars falling, but real. That's why we put him here, why we bound him. Lucian was always too powerful, too beloved. When he decided he was tired of our games, tired of the killing, he became dangerous to our way of life. So we gave him a choice. Let us end him permanently or sleep until someone loved him enough to wake him. We knew no one would. Who could love a sleeping vampire? A monster they never knew? 300 years we've had peace, the blonde vampire said. 300 years without his judgment, without his attempts to make us more than we are. We're not about to let that end because some curious human girl stumbled into his tomb. They were going to kill her. Illyra saw in the way they moved, coordinated without words, cutting off every escape route. She was going to die in this cold stone chamber, and her mother would never know what happened, would die slowly in that hospital bed, waiting for a daughter who'd never return. The unfairness of it burned through her fear, hot and sharp. Wait! The word came out stronger than she felt. You said you needed a caretaker for appearances. If I disappear, won't that raise questions? The duchy knows I'm here. People know. Accidents happen in old castles, the male vampire said. Such a shame. A loose stone in the tower. Perhaps a tragic fall. Illyra's hand, pressed against the crystal coffin for balance, felt suddenly warm. Impossible, given how cold everything was. But the crystal was warming beneath her palm, heat spreading up her arm. The vampires noticed too, their expressions shifting from predatory confidence to alarm. What are you doing? The blonde vampire lunged forward, but the third caught her arm. Don't. Look at the coffin. The crystal was glowing, faint at first but growing brighter, and inside, Lucian Valmont's too slow breathing was accelerating. 1 breath per minute became 1 every 30 seconds. Then faster still. The symbols carved around the coffin began to shine with the same light, and the temperature in the chamber spiked, going from glacial to merely cold in heartbeats. Impossible, the male vampire whispered. She hasn't kissed him. The binding requires. Love isn't just romance, you idiots. The third vampire was backing toward the door, pulling the other two with him. It's any love, compassion, connection, caring. And she's been down here for a week talking to him like he's a person instead of a monster. To Illyra, with something like respect. What are you? No one, Illyra said honestly. Just someone who's tired of people being treated like they're disposable. The light from the coffin intensified until Illyra had to close her eyes. She heard the 3 vampires flee, their footsteps retreating up the stone stairs at inhuman speed. Heat washed over her in waves, and the sound of cracking crystal filled the chamber like ice breaking on a spring river. When she could finally open her eyes, the coffin had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and Lucian Valmont was sitting up, gasping like a man pulled from drowning. His eyes, when they opened fully, were the color of amber, and they fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, in a voice rough from centuries of silence, "You're real. I thought I was dreaming. Your voice talking to me. I heard you." Illyra's knees gave out, and she sat down hard on the stone floor, shock finally catching up with her. "You could hear me? In the dark, in the nothing." He moved slowly, as if relearning how his body worked, and knelt beside her. Up close, he was even more beautiful, but it was a humanity in his expression that held her, the wonder, the confusion, the profound relief. Your voice was the only thing that existed. I held on to it like a rope. Who are you? Illyra. Just Illyra. I'm the caretaker. I wasn't supposed to find you. But you did. His hand lifted, hesitating before touching her cheek, so gentle she barely felt it. His skin was warming, losing that corpse-cold stillness. And you stayed. You talked to me. Why? How could she explain that she'd recognized something in his sleeping face, in the inscription that condemned and elevated him in the same breath? That she understood what it meant to remove yourself from a world that had no place for you? Because you were alone, she said finally. And I know what that feels like. Lucian's expression shifted, something breaking open behind his eyes. The binding required true love's kiss. But I felt the crystal warm when you touched it, not when you kissed me. I don't understand. Your friends. Ilera saw his expression darken at the word. The other vampires. They said love isn't just romance. That any love could break it. I think. She hesitated, but his gaze was so open, so desperate for understanding. I think I loved you before you woke up. Not romantically, but as a person. Someone who deserved better than being locked away like a mistake. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd said something wrong. Then Lucian laughed, and it was the most alive sound she'd heard in the castle, full of genuine joy and disbelief. 300 years they kept me there, so certain no one could ever care enough to wake me. And you did it by simply seeing me, treating me like I mattered. His laughter faded into something more serious. Thank you. Those words aren't enough, but thank you. The 3 vampires, Ilera said urgently, as the reality of the situation crashed back. They ran, but they'll come back. They were afraid of you, afraid of what you'd do if you woke up, afraid I'd hold them accountable. Lucian stood, offering his hand to help her up. His grip was strong but careful, as if he feared breaking her. I spent 2 centuries trying to convince our kind that we could be more than predators, that immortality was wasted on cruelty. They saw it as a threat to their freedom. When I refused to back down, they orchestrated this. He gestured at the broken crystal, a binding that should have been eternal. But it wasn't. No. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Because of you. Tell me, Ilera, who is just a caretaker, do you want to leave? I can arrange it. Money, safety, everything you need. You've given me an impossible gift. I would see you protected. It was a generous offer. The smart offer. Ilera could take it, return to her mother, use whatever resources a grateful vampire lord could provide, walk away from this cold castle and its dangerous inhabitants. But she thought about the 3 vampires and their casual dismissal of her life, their certainty that Lucian would remain bound forever, thought about how many times she'd been underestimated, treated as disposable. Or, she asked. Lucian smiled. It was sharp and dangerous and full of promise. Or you could stay. Help me remind our kind that mercy and humanity aren't weaknesses. I suspect you're braver than you know. Ilera, and I could use an ally who sees clearly, who doesn't frighten easily. His expression softened. But it would be dangerous. They'll come for me and anyone standing beside me. The prickling awareness was back, that sense of a choice being offered. Safety or significance. Invisibility or being seen. Ilera thought about her mother, who'd taught her that love meant protecting people, even when it cost you everything. Thought about the vampire who'd chosen 300 years of nothing to protect a world from himself. I need make a phone call first, she said. Arrange proper care for my mother. Then, she met his amber eyes steadily. Then I think I'd like to stay. The next hours moved in a blur. Lucian's resources, dormant for centuries, were extensive and meticulously maintained by human retainers who seemed unsurprised by his return. Her mother was transferred to a private facility in Switzerland, with round-the-clock care and doctors who actually listened. The money appeared in accounts Ilera hadn't known existed. It was done with such efficiency, it made her head spin. How? She asked as dawn approached and Lucian showed no signs of needing to sleep in a coffin or flee from sunlight. The coffin myths are exaggerated, he said, amused. Sunlight won't kill me, though it's uncomfortable. And as for the resources, I had 3 centuries to plan what I'd do if I ever woke. I was simply uncertain if I'd want to. He paused by the Great Hall's windows, watching the horizon lighten. Thank you for making me want to. Ilera joined him, marveling at how different the castle felt with him in it. Warmer, more alive, as if his presence animated the stones. The 3 vampires, she said. Will they really come back? Without question. Morgan, Theron, and Cassius. They were my makers once, before I outgrew their teachings. They'll see my return as a threat to everything they built. He glanced at her. I won't force you to stay for what comes next. The offer of safety still stands. I'm tired of being safe, Ilera said, and meant it. My whole life, I've done the smart thing, the careful thing. Stayed small, so the world wouldn't notice me enough to take more than it already had. And where did it get me? My mother's still dying. I'm still poor. I'm still invisible. You're not invisible to me. The words were simple, but they hit her like a fist to the chest. When was the last time someone had really seen her? Not Alara the caretaker, the daughter, the girl who managed. Just Alara. Then let me help you, she said. I don't have supernatural powers or centuries of experience, but I know how to survive, and I know how to see the truth in people, even when they're lying. Those are skills too. Lucian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Partners, then. Though I warn you, this may become very complicated very quickly. He wasn't wrong. Morrigan and her companions returned that evening with reinforcements. 12 vampires in total, surrounding the castle, and Alara felt the temperature drop even in the rooms Lucian had warmed. They could have attacked, overwhelming through sheer numbers, but instead Morrigan called for parley. Arrogance, Lucian explained. They wanted him to know he was beaten before they destroyed him. The meeting happened in the Great Hall, with Alara standing beside Lucian, feeling absurdly human and fragile among creatures who could kill her with a thought. But Lucian's presence beside her was steady, and when Morrigan's cold gaze dismissed her as irrelevant, Alara felt her spine stiffen with familiar anger. 300 years was enough? Lucian asked mildly, You still fear what I represent? We don't fear you, Theron said. We simply won't tolerate your interference. We built something beautiful in your absence, a society where we take what we want, as we were meant to. Your conscience was always a weakness. Was it? Lucian's voice remained calm, but Alara felt the power radiating from him, making the air crackle. Because from where I stand, I see you build a house of cards. You rule through fear, but you're terrified of being found out, of humanity, learning what you are and hunting you down, of other vampires growing strong enough to challenge you. You call it freedom, but it looks like a prison to me. You're one vampire, Morrigan said. What can you possibly do? Me? Very little. But I'm not alone anymore. Lucian glanced at Alara, and there was something in his expression that made her heart race. This woman freed me when she had no reason to, when it gained her nothing. She saw me as a person worth saving. That's more power than you've ever wielded. The power to inspire loyalty through choice rather than fear. It was a beautiful speech, but Alara saw the problem immediately. The other vampires were shifting, preparing to attack. Words wouldn't stop them. She needed something else, needed to think like she did when creditors came calling, and her mother needed medicine they couldn't afford. Find the leverage. Find what they really feared. You're right, she said, and every vampire's attention snapped to her. Lucian is just one vampire, but I'm human, and I have proof of what you are, photos, documentation, everything. If I die here, it all goes to the Historical Society. The duchy, the media, you'll have to kill them too, and their families, and everyone they told. How many people can you kill before someone notices? Before humanity mobilizes against you? It was a bluff. She had no such documentation, but her voice was steady, her gaze unwavering, and she'd learned long ago that confidence so lies better than truth. The vampires exchanged glances, and Alara saw the calculation in their eyes. Was she telling the truth? Could they afford to find out? You're lying, Morrigan said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. Am I? Alara smiled, channeling every ounce of bravado she'd ever needed to face down landlords and bill collectors. I spent a week in this castle before Lucian woke. A week photographing, documenting, sending emails to people who'll notice if I disappear. You think I'm stupid enough to come to a vampire's castle without insurance? Lucian said nothing, but his hand found hers, a quick squeeze of acknowledgement and something like admiration. The other vampires were backing toward the doors now, their certainty crumbling. Cassius looked at Lucian with something approaching respect. This isn't over, Morrigan said finally, but perhaps we can reach an understanding. You stay here in your castle. We'll leave you alone. But if you interfere with our affairs, then we'll discuss it, Lucian interrupted smoothly. like civilized beings. No threats, no violence, just conversation. Unless you prefer Alara's insurance policy goes into effect. They left, melting into the shadows, and the castle's temperature normalized. Ilara's knees went weak, and Lucian caught her before she could fall, guiding her to a chair. That was the most audacious bluff I've witnessed in 4 centuries, he said, and he was grinning. You're magnificent. I'm terrified, Ilara admitted, but she was grinning too, giddy with survival and the shock of her own daring. Did that really just work? For now. They'll test the bluff eventually. We'll need to actually create the documentation you described. Insurance, as you called it. But you bought us time. More importantly, you showed them something they didn't expect. A human who doesn't cower. They'll remember that. He was still holding her hand, and he seemed to realize it at the same moment she did, pulling back with something like embarrassment. Forgive me. I'm not accustomed to touching people. Ilara supplied. Having allies? Being awake. Yes. His smile turned self-deprecating. All of those. I've been alone for so long that I've forgotten how to be otherwise. But I find I'm grateful. For you. For this. For being alive. Ilara understood exactly what he meant. She'd been alone too, in all the ways that mattered. Being seen, being valued for something beyond what she could do or provide. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. We're quite a pair, she said. A vampire who chose oblivion over cruelty, and a human who's tired of being invisible. What we do now. Now! Lucian stood, offering his hand again. Now we figure out how to build something better. You freed me from one prison. Let me help you escape yours. Your mother is safe. Your needs provided for. What would you do, Ilara, if you could do anything? The question should have been overwhelming. Instead, standing in that ancient hall with a vampire who'd chosen conscience over convenience, who'd let himself be buried alive rather than become something he despised, Ilara found the answer came easily. I'd stay here, help you, learn what it means to matter beyond just surviving. You already matter. You saved a life today. Several. If we count preventing a massacre. But his expression softened into something warm and wondering. But if you want to stay, I would be honored. This castle has been a tomb for too long. Perhaps together we can make it something else. A home. The word hung between them, full of possibility. Ilara had been so focused on survival she'd forgotten what it meant to truly live, to want something beyond the next crisis. But looking at Lucian, at the hope in his ancient eyes and the careful way he held himself, as if afraid too much emotion might shatter this fragile new reality, she felt something stir in her chest. Not romantic love. Not yet, though the potential was there like a seed waiting for spring. But something equally powerful. Connection. Being seen. Matching. Yes, she said. Let's make a home. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised both of them. Ilara continued maintaining the castle, but now with Lucian's help and resources. Rooms long closed were opened, aired out, brought back to life. They documented everything, just as she claimed, photos, video, written records, and dispersed copies of lawyers and contacts Lucian had maintained through his human retainers. The insurance policy became real. But more than that, they talked. Lucian shared stories of his long life, the mistakes and triumphs, the slow realization that immortality without purpose was its own kind of death. Ilara told him about her mother, her interrupted education, the quiet dreams she'd buried under necessity. And somehow, in the telling, those dreams didn't seem so impossible anymore. You wanted to study history, Lucian said one evening as they sat in the library he'd begun restoring. Specifically, medieval European social structures. I could help with that. You lived it, Ilara said, wonder creeping into her voice. You could tell me what the textbooks get wrong. More than you'd think. His smile was amused. But more than that, you have resources now. You could return to university, complete your degree, not because you needed to survive, but because you want to learn. The idea was dizzying. To study simply for the joy of knowledge, without the weight of bills and responsibilities crushing every moment. I'd still want to live here, she said, if that's allowed. The castle feels like it needs people, like it's been waiting. It has been waiting for someone like you. Lucian's gaze was steady, and in it, Elara saw the truth he wasn't quite saying, that he'd been waiting too. For someone who saw past the monster to the man, who understood that choosing to be better was harder and more meaningful than being born good. 3 weeks after Lucian's awakening, Elara's mother was well enough for visitors. They drove to Switzerland in a car that still smelled new, and Elara watched her mother's face light up in a way it hadn't for years. The treatment was working. The color was returning to her cheeks, the light to her eyes. "You look different," her mother said, studying Elara with a mother's keen awareness. "Happier? What happened?" How could she explain? That she'd stumbled into a vampire's tomb and found purpose? That she'd faced down creatures who could kill her with a thought and discovered she was braver than she'd imagined? That she was building something real with someone who understood what it meant to be alone? "I found a home," she said finally, "and someone who sees me." Her mother's smile turned knowing. "Good. You've spent too long taking care of everyone else. Time someone took care of you." But that wasn't quite right. Elara realized on the drive back. Lucian wasn't taking care of her like she was another responsibility. They were taking care of each other, building something together that neither could create alone. It was partnership, the kind she'd read about but never quite believed existed outside stories. "Thank you," she said as they neared the castle, its towers dark against the twilight sky. "For everything. The treatment for my mother, the resources, the trust." "Elara." Lucian pulled the car to a stop before they reached the gates, turning to face her fully. "You freed me from 300 years of darkness. There is no debt here. If anything, I'm the one who should be grateful." He hesitated, then continued. "I've been thinking about what comes next. Morrigan and the others won't honor their agreement forever. Eventually, they'll move against us. And when they do, I want you safe. I could arrange." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I'm not going anywhere. We're partners, remember? That means facing what comes together. You're human, fragile. If they hurt you to punish me, then I'll deal with it. Lucian, my whole life I've been told I'm not strong enough, not important enough to matter. Don't you start too." She softened her voice. "I know I'm mortal. I know I'm going to be the weakest person in any conflict with your kind. But I'm also clever, and I'm stubborn, and I see things others miss. That has value, too." For a long moment, he simply looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Then, slowly, he smiled, not the polite social smile she'd seen him use, but something genuine and full of warmth. "You're right. I apologize. Partners means trusting you to make your own choices, even when those choices frighten me." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with careful fingers. "I'm not used to caring what happens to someone. It makes me want to wrap you in protection until nothing can touch you." "I know the feeling," Elara admitted, "but we can't live like that. We'd just be creating another kind of tomb." They drove through the gates, and the castle's windows glowed with warm light. Home. The word still felt strange, too good to be true, but Elara was learning to accept it. Accept that maybe, finally, she'd found a place where she didn't have to shrink herself to fit. The attack came on a Monday, 3 months after Lucian's awakening. Elara was in the library, surrounded by books on medieval land management, when the temperature plummeted so fast her breath froze in her lungs. Lucian appeared in the doorway, moving with inhuman speed, his face set in grim lines. "They're here, Morrigan and at least 20 others. More than before." Elara's heart hammered, but her mind stayed clear. This was what they'd prepared for. The documentation? Already being sent. If we don't check in within 3 hours, it goes public. He crossed to her, taking her hands. His were cold, but steady. "I need you to listen carefully. There's a passage in my chambers that leads to the valley. Take it. Run. I'll hold them off, but I need to know you're safe before." "No." Elara squeezed his hands. "We discussed this. We faced this together. This is different. There are too many. Even I can't." "Then we don't fight them. We talk to them. You said Cassius looked at you with respect after my bluff. Maybe others feel the same. Maybe they're tired of Morgan's rule, but too afraid to say it. Lucian stared at her like she'd suggested flying. That's crazy? Probably, but fighting is what they expect. What if we surprise them? Ilera pulled him toward the Great Hall. Come on, we don't have much time. They were waiting in the hall, 23 vampires radiating cold and power. Morgan stood at the center, victorious certainty in her smile. Your bluff has run its course, Lucian. We've been watching, cataloging. We know exactly where every copy of your documentation is located. Within an hour, it will all be destroyed and you with it. Impressive, Lucian said calmly. Thorough, but you're missing something crucial. And what's that? Ilera stepped forward, past Lucian, ignoring his hiss of concern. She met Morgan's cold gaze steadily. You're missing that not everyone here agrees with you. She let her gaze sweep the assembled vampires. How many of you are here because you want to be, and how many because you're afraid of what happens if you refuse? How many are tired of hiding, of the constant fear that humanity will discover you? How many would like to live openly, safely, if there was a way? Foolish human, Morgan spat. They're loyal to me. Are they? Ilera focused on Cassius, remembering to respect his eyes. Or are they loyal to survival? Because that's what Lucian offers. A different way to survive, maybe even thrive. Not through domination, but through coexistence. She speaks sense. Cassius's voice cut through the tension. I'm tired of this, Morgan. Tired of the fear, the constant vigilance. Lucian was right before. We built a prison and called it freedom. If you like the story, comment down below. Thank you for tatching.